The Husqvarna Svartpilen 801. It's hard to say, but easy to ride.
At its core, it's a naked bike with all the electronics a boy could need and an 800cc engine that screams performance.
But on the other hand, it looks retro and mellow. It has handlebars that force you to have very good posture and tires that look like they belong on a flat track bike, not a street bike. Am I confused or is it confused? Either way, I have just 127 hours with this Swedish migrant to find out.
Thank you to Insta360 for sponsoring this video. Get a free gift like a motorcycle bundle with your camera order by using my links down below. I have never really kept an eye on Husqvarna street bikes, probably because they do their most notable work in the off-road segment. And I'm embarrassed to admit that a few years ago, I didn't even know the difference between the Svartpilen and Svartpilen models. In all honesty, I thought one was the little 401 and that the other model was the bigger 701, but that is not the case. And I didn't even know that they've upgraded to the new 801. All I knew was that I loved the styling of the old 701. So when Husqvarna South Africa offered to let me live with one for a few days, I was intrigued. And I had to quickly learn the difference between the Svartpilen and Svartpilen. But due to my husky ignorance, I immediately noticed a few quirks on my ride home.
The biggest eye-catcher are these Pirelli MT60 RS tires that look like they belong more on an adventure bike than a naked bike. But don't worry, Pirelli assures us that they're for fun bikes, so now we know it's fun.
The engine is lovely and torquey, revs up rapidly and defies the bike's mellow presence. The coolant would be very easy to top up.
I hate the way the mirrors look, and just to rub it in, they work really well. How annoying.
And finally, it gets lost in photos. It has great lines, but this dark color kind of hides that.
So here's what I learned. The Svartpilen has traditional upright handlebars for a more comfortable riding position than the Svartpilen. It also has a different headlight. And of course, this tire choice. Basically, if you want something sportier, get the Svartpilen, and if you want an all-rounder, get this. And they offer both models in a variety of engine sizes.
It didn't take long to realize that this engine is the best part of this bike.
It's a 799cc parallel twin. And I'm sure you've heard that bikes like Yamaha's MT-07 and just about every other bike that uses a parallel twin these days has a 270-degree crank because it sounds awesome. Well, this is slightly different with a 285-degree crank. So it supposedly sounds more like KTM's V-twins, like you would find in the Super Duke. Not that you can hear much with that stock exhaust.
It makes just over 100 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a ton, but paired with a good amount of torque at a usable RPM, a lightweight bike, and a frame nicknamed the Scalpel, it is an absolute hoot without feeling like you're a danger to society.
But yes, this engine is KTM's LC8C, which is infamous for camshaft issues on older models. At least in theory, this has been fixed on newer engines like this. I hate it when people call Husqvarna's KTMs in videos or constantly refer to them as Dukes, but in a way, it's a compliment. Obviously, Husqvarna is a part of the KTM group, and the Svartpilen is based on a 790 Duke, which, don't forget, is a really good bike. Although it would have been even better as a two-stroke because then it wouldn't have had camshafts. But I love the idea of a company creating an incredible engine and chassis and using that to create multiple bikes with different styling and price points. Speaking of which, the Svartpilen starts at around $11,000, but T's and C's and tech packs apply, which I will get to in a minute. And it has so many little touches worth pointing out. Like this retro round headlight with a modern LED ring and a Husky logo in the center. This tiny windshield that's mostly just for appearances. This rugged looking 3-piece mudguard in the front, obviously with a Husky logo.
There are a few more logos on all of the brake calipers, one on the fuel cap, this built-in tank protector that is a brilliant idea, one on the back of the passenger seat, and some 801 logos on the tank, between the two seats, and even on the foot peg brackets if they count.
I've also never seen mesh intake vents in a subframe like this before, but I really like it. We can all agree that stock exhausts are not pretty, but this one has a textured end cap, which definitely makes it unique and slightly better looking. Maybe.
In my opinion, the back half of this bike is really appealing, but then the front half looks a bit busy and cluttered with the tall handlebars and the long protruding mirrors.
I know it's supposed to give it a more utilitarian look, especially with those tires, so I guess it's working.
With a bit more time, the Svartpilen gives off the vibe of being a bare bones bike. A bike that is trying to focus on the basics of motorcycling. It wants to be able to do anything you ask of it relatively well, but know one job super well.
The irony is that a modern take on a basic bike still has a giant TFT display. It still has ride modes, ABS, and a quick shifter.
And yet, it still has a simplistic feel. None of that stuff feels like it interferes with the grassroots fun this bike offers.
If you want that stuff to interfere a bit more, you can always buy the dynamic package for $420, which is an appropriate number for this way of thinking.
This unlocks an additional dynamic ride mode alongside the usual street, sport, and rain modes. Then you can fine-tune all of your settings from 10 levels of traction control to 5 wheelie control levels and ABS and throttle response.
Honestly, it's fun to do, but I don't think you would miss it if you didn't have it. When you have 200 horsepower, fine-tuning a bike makes far more of a difference than with 100 horsepower. But that's just my opinion. The only setting I found worth fine-tuning was traction control because it is far too reserved when accelerating out of a corner and takes away way too much power.
To its credit, the menus are vivid and easy to navigate, especially with the lovely switchgear that feels way better than orange switchgear in my opinion. And it's even backlit. There's also a USB-C port on the side of the display to power any devices you need.
And cruise control is a $289 extra, but this bike doesn't have it, so it might be terrible, but it's probably good.
There is no visible strain gauge for the quick shifter. It all happens internally, I guess.
On the tin, it does everything right. It's bi-directional and it gets the job done. However, it feels very tactile, which a lot of people might like. However, I would not put it in the smooth category. The
Svartpilen doesn't really feel out of place anywhere, but it really shines around town. It will happily pop little power wheelies to keep you entertained. That giant and exposed radiator keeps it cool even at slow city speeds. Those hideous but functional mirrors and that riding position that encourages you to do over-the-shoulder checks before changing lanes make it feel very safe, especially combined with the tall height to see over cars. And some of the same features make it comfortable on the freeway too. Although I suspect this little windshield is more effective for me because I'm short. Ultimately, the bike has enough power to get you into trouble, but both the engine and wind protection make it feel happiest at legal speeds.
But the best thing about this bike on the highway is this comfortable seat. It doesn't just look good, so there's no need to rush.
Yet, at first, there was one thing in the back of my mind holding it back. Those tires.
Now, you might have noticed that there is no off-road mode, no longer travel suspension, or even wire-spoked wheels, which would look retro.
The only hint at being able to go off-road is these tires. And the more I rode the Svartpilen without those tires interfering, the happier I got.
Ultimately, they're purely for aesthetics and marketing. I think Husqvarna want to angle this bike as though it can do it all. And it can, for the most part. It will handle a sand road and a sidewalk, but most importantly, they haven't sacrificed on road grip or feel like I thought they would. But with that said, I would still swap them out if it was my bike.
The torquey motor is addictive through the twistier roads. It feels very light and nimble to turn in, while still feeling in control and planted. The only downside is that it's an unpleasant shape to squeeze with your legs. But as fun as motorcycles are, I often feel as though riding them makes time pass too quickly.
For example, 2 weeks ago, I got to ride in the Alps for the first time in my life, and it already feels like it was just a dream.
The 3 days of riding passed by so quickly that I've just been watching the footage I got on the trip over and over again to relive the experience.
And it goes for every adventure. I love that I can relive the track day that I did on my R1 when I got it in 360 degrees, or the trip to the mountains I did with my wife, and I can recrop it vertically for Instagram to share with family and friends, or horizontally so that I can watch it in high res on my TV. That is not something our fathers could do back in their day, especially not with such ease.
With my Insta360 camera, I just clamp it to the bike, extend the selfie stick and hit record.
Then it does everything for me. It gets rid of the selfie stick automatically, as well as levels the horizon.
The wind guard gets me good exhaust audio, and it can even make editing easier with AI.
So you don't even have to be a videographer anymore to get good shots easily. And I'll let you in on a secret. The previous generation X4 is 90% as good, but cheaper. But if you want a camera that is going to last years to come, thanks to the replaceable lenses, the X5 is definitely the way to go.
These things are built tough, and they capture the most immersive memories that last a lot longer than the ride.
But a lot of the easy handling is down to suspension.
These 43mm WP Apex upside-down forks are firm and didn't disappoint despite their lack of preload adjustment.
The WP rear shock, however, does have adjustable preload, but is missing adjustable compression damping.
I expected it to feel like a cheaper unit as a result, but it never stood out to me, which is always a good thing.
In the braking department, we've got these 4-piston radially mounted calipers on each side that are made by J. Juan. I've never heard of them before this bike, but they seem fine.
I think the front radial master cylinder is also made by them, as well as the rear single piston brake caliper. On paper, the brakes tick all the boxes, but I just want a bit more feeling.
Living with it has been really easy. It's on the taller side, but it's still light and easy to push around. The rider triangle is approachable for most riders, and I'm also just shy of flat-footing it at just 5'7".
Even with the extra weight of a passenger, it was comfortable to maneuver at my height, which means I have my wife's summary of the passenger amenities because I took her with me on my longer weekend ride in the freezing cold, and here it is.
Easy to climb on and off apparently, even with a million Insta360 cameras attached to the bike. But the seat is thin and uncomfortable, surprisingly, which is the opposite to the rider's seat, although she did like the grippy fabric and these ribs. As the rider, I don't think I've ever had a more comfortable experience with a passenger on a bike where you sit so upright. Usually in this position, you bang helmets all the time, and I don't think we did that even once on this bike. Even the basic shock held up well with the extra weight, although having the extra weight so far back did make it a bit more difficult to turn in, and there were a few times where I wanted wider handlebars for a bit more leverage.
At the end of the day, this 801 encompasses the spirit of motorcycling perfectly.
Which is refreshing in a world where every new bike needs to be fast, fancy, or cheap.
While riding, it feels like a modern take on bare bones biking. It looks unique, it won't get boring to ride anytime soon, and I think it can help any rider figure out which genre of motorcycling they enjoy the most.
Nevertheless, 127 hours later, Husqvarna South Africa have repossessed my Svartpilen, so let's give it a score out of 60 to see how it stacks up on the leaderboard. This is also the first middleweight naked bike, believe it or not, but I suspect it's going to compete best with the Turismo Veloci or the F900. Styling. I respect the retro and unique styling, but I'm probably more of a Svartpilen guy. 6 out of 10. Practicality. It feels very practical with its sort of bare bones approach. It'll do almost everything you need it to. 8 out of 10. Fun. Way more naughty fun than it looks. 7 out of 10. Price. It's similarly priced to something like a Yamaha MT-09, but interestingly, it costs more than a 790 Duke. So 6 out of 10, I guess. Speed. It is plenty fast enough for everyday use, but only slightly above average in the grand scheme of things. 8 out of 10. Sound. Luckily, I've heard this engine with a real exhaust and it sounds brilliant. 8 out of 10.
Giving the Husqvarna Svartpilen 801 43 out of 60, placing it just above a CBR 1000 and below an S1000 XR, which conveniently I would choose to daily ride over the Svartpilen.
But anyway, let me know if you would choose this over all the other middleweight naked bike options, and I'll see you on the next ride.